The Arctic in winter, a white desert, a frozen hell on earth. This inhospitable land tests all life which dares to try to survive here. One creature seems to be everywhere, searching for food where there appears to be only emptiness, fighting for its life by staying on the move. Wind becomes a weapon in the Arctic. Needle-sharp particles of ice move at 100 miles an hour. Wind chill drops temperatures to 80 degrees below zero. Human flesh would freeze here in less than a minute. This is the world of the Arctic fox. The Arctic fox lives in a modern-day ice age. Here, glaciers still creep along the earth. Water is locked solid, and trees have no place at all. This small predator is only the size of a large house cat. Its thick fur keeps it warm. His wits keep him from starving to death. These sled dogs have just been fed frozen seal meat. For the fox, it could mean a rare opportunity for meat in the dead of winter. Native people still use dog sleds, although it's an unusual sight. Finally, the Arctic's most formidable hunter heads out on ancient roads across the ice. Years ago, Arctic foxes searching for scraps of food invaded ships that had become stranded in ice. Crew members called them an Arctic plague. The ice fox is basically a loner. But each year, when breeding season arrives, his social graces return. A couple reunites after a long winter apart and celebrates on the frozen sea. Now, there's a dramatic change for the foxes, from solitary life to family life. This is a story of two families. One lives here on the coast of Spitsbergen, a remote Norwegian island well within the Arctic Circle. This is the Coast family. The other family is Russian. They live far away in the heart of the Siberian tundra. They're called the Tundra family. It's May in Siberia, and the ice fox's frozen world is just beginning to melt. The Arctic has only two seasons. A long, harsh winter and a brief but glorious summer. But winter is not officially over until the snow geese arrive. For centuries, native people have celebrated the sighting of these magnificent harbingers of summer. The geese have flown thousands of miles, all the way from California and British Columbia to breed here in the most northerly reaches of Russia. The tundra family has been eagerly awaiting their arrival. The geese are in a race against time. They have to mate, lay eggs, and raise their young before winter returns. That's only a few months away. Back in Norway, the Coast family has been awaiting the arrival of birds as well. Millions of them. Seabirds swarm to the coast to spend their summers by the shore. The little auks are having trouble finding their breeding burrows. These birds are so small the Coast family doesn't have to wait for them to lay eggs. There's been little to hunt in the past 8 months of winter, and the foxes are a bit out of practice. All she manages to do is clear the slopes. Her mate is busy devouring a reindeer carcass. The frosty air acts like a deep freeze, preserving meat until a scavenger like Icefox comes along. Scent marking is a polite way of asking an intruder to leave the family territory. But the scent of the carcass keeps the intruder around. He has to be shown the way out. On the tundra, the snow geese are trying to find something to eat. Only a few plants can grow on the tundra's thin soil, spread like icing on a cake, atop a deep core of permafrost. Underneath their nests, something is beginning to stir. Lemmings have begun to emerge from their underground winter hideaways. These small rodents have enormous sex drives. Their population keeps increasing until it finally crashes. Lemmings are a major source of food for the foxes, but this is a bad year for the lemmings and a miserable one for the tundra family. They must steal eggs instead, which is as much of a challenge as catching lemmings. Each egg is guarded by an opposing team. tundra family pesters and harasses the birds, causing chaos in the crowded colony. He manages to snatch an egg from a nest left unguarded. These little thieves can practically destroy a goose colony, raiding nest after nest, day after day. They aren't just eating for today, but caching away emergency rations for tomorrow. In other places, the food would rot, but in the Arctic, the permafrost acts as an underground refrigerator. It's now midnight, but in an Arctic summer, the sun shines 24 hours a day. The geese have to be on constant alert. An intruder, now changing into his summer coat, approaches the tundra family's territory. He tries to race in and steal a few eggs for his own family. Another intruder has the same idea. Soon, the colony is overrun with foxes. Many of the geese have just laid a second clutch of eggs to replace the ones taken by the tundra family. They put up a valiant defense. These eggs are their last chance for a family this year. The intruder goes back over the front line with his booty. The tundra mother has been staying home. She has 8 new pups to look after. They're only 3 weeks old. As the season changes, the ice fox's camouflage changes appropriately, from winter whites to summer browns. The pups try to nurse, but their mother's milk is beginning to run dry. Although there are plenty of eggs around, these pups need meat. It will take about 60 lemmings a day to feed this litter. With so few this year, there's trouble ahead for the tundra family. Things are looking a lot brighter on the coast. The little auks have hatched. They're hidden beneath boulders, but they won't stay hidden for long. Arctic birds nest on cliffs to get as far away from this wily predator as possible. Glaucous gulls can swallow a little auk whole without missing a wing beat. With these two predators threatening from the skies above and the slopes below, the parents are forced to abandon their nests. During this mass exodus, the thousands of nestlings left behind are vulnerable. The coast mother takes advantage of the situation. She too has hungry mouths to feed. The coast family relies on birds, not lemmings, and there are plenty of plump youngsters to eat. A lazy gull hopes to steal from the pups, but they're big enough now to chase him off. The coast pups are having a seabird feast. On the Siberian tundra, it's another story altogether. Without lemmings, geese and foxes have been in constant battle. But some of the clutches have survived. These snow geese are actually feeding on the tops of trees, dwarf willows whose trunks are no thicker than a thumb. Their growth is stunted by a summer that passes all too quickly. For a few days each year, temperatures can soar into the 40s, days of rare luxury in the Arctic. The only thing predictable about Arctic weather is that it is totally unpredictable. A summer day can begin with a heat wave and end with a blizzard. Severe storms can bury the geese alive, but this year their biggest threat is foxes. No matter what the weather, the tundra family continues to plunder the colony. Eggs are a poor substitute for lemmings, and the pups aren't getting enough to eat. But this year, that's all the tundra has to offer. On Spitsbergen Island, the seabirds are crammed onto the cliffs. The most experienced birds choose the top tier, leaving the novices to confront the coast family. The parents, like these guillemots, feed their young from the bounty of the rich Arctic seas. Arctic soil is extremely poor, but the earth below the seabird cities receives 100 tons of fertilizer every year. Reindeer come here to munch on the luxuriant carpet. They get so fat and heavy they can hardly walk. The coast pups are well fed too and full of excess energy. A lump of reindeer fur makes a good toy. The Coast family has had a great summer. In midsummer, the world of the tundra family is completely transformed. Despite constant looting by foxes, some of the eggs have managed to hatch. But the foxes are in trouble. The mother has no more milk, and the cubs are begging for food. Both she and her mate have searched for lemmings all summer, but they've only found a few. The family stays near the den until the pups are older. For a while, the parents catch goslings. But that supply now waddles off to feeding grounds 50 miles away. Soon, there will be nothing left for the foxes to eat. The parents are forced to abandon the litter in order to save themselves. The father goes first. His mate will join him shortly. The pups are too young to survive on their own. Like so many others, they will most certainly die of starvation in their dens. On Spitsbergen Island, summer is on the way out, and so are the birds. The guillemot families must head out before their chicks have learned to fly. They will have to swim south for the winter. But the sea is 1,500 feet straight down. How they get there is one of the most extraordinary feats in the natural world. If the chicks miss their target, they'll fall into enemy territory. One small step becomes a giant leap, a free fall, escorted by anxious parents. For some chicks, the flight is direct, with a safe landing at sea. Others are not so lucky. The Coast family takes advantage of a crash landing. Glaucous gulls compete for the food falling from the sky. The coast father brings the chick home for the pups. When there's such a surplus, foxes will store food underground until winter. Strangely enough, they often bury the birds in neat rows and without their heads. The chicks are surrounded. While the predators squabble over the prey attempts a daring escape to the sea. His parents encourage him from just beyond the shore. Despite the horrifying experience, the youngster is unharmed and reunited at last with his family. But the celebration is short-lived. The birds must press on. The seas will soon freeze, and any young guillemots left behind will be stranded. It's now September, and winter is creeping onto the shores. Coast Pup is wrapped in a new winter coat. His family has split up, and the pups now have to fend for themselves. Most animals found in the Arctic in summer are gone by winter. But reindeer are permanent residents. Unlike other deer, both males and females grow antlers. By summer's end, they begin to shed velvet. Most of the birds are gone, and life has changed from feast to famine. Coast Pup is desperate to put on weight. He'll eat anything, even this piece of reindeer velvet. He can no longer stay on his parents' territory or on the territory of any other fox. He constantly finds himself an unwelcome trespasser. A few weeks ago, Coast Pup was back at the cozy family den, well fed and playing with his siblings. Now he's an outcast, wandering the rocky shores alone on a constant search for something to eat. The first winter on his own will be the hardest of his life. Male reindeer have a lot to do before winter sets in. Competition for females takes the form of pushy arguments rather than heated battles. In perfect synchrony with the Arctic, calves will be born after the icy winds have passed. The females will be pregnant all winter. Coast Pup will survive the bleak winter by traveling to the ends of the earth. He may walk 1,000 miles in search of food. He must also learn that nearly any plant or animal, alive or dead, qualifies as food. Soon the pack ice will begin to form, and Coast Pup will head out into a desolate wilderness on the frozen seas. Most young foxes will starve to death. Of the 3 cubs in his family, it's likely that only one will survive to breed next year. The odds are against him. Farther along the coast, a few kittiwakes remain. A fox from a neighboring territory is taking advantage of the bird's flight delays. Neither snow nor sleet nor towering cliffs are deterrents for a desperate ice fox. Even a scrap of fish dropped by the birds will do just fine. No luck this time. As far as he may roam, there's no escape for the ice fox from this endless search for food. Those animals that can escape this place do. barnacle geese are on their way to Scotland. As cold as it is there in winter, it's a lot warmer than the Arctic. Every inch of the ice fox's body is designed to fight the cold. Most important of all is its fur, perhaps the warmest of any animal. Reindeer and foxes are left to brave the bitter winter alone. Winter kills in the Arctic. Native people have known that for centuries. Europeans were totally unprepared for the Arctic in winter. They died of scurvy, starvation, and exposure on places like Dead Man's Island. The land was so frozen that they could not even be buried. First came the explorers, then the exploiters. The riches of the Arctic seas lured thousands of men to the frozen north. Whales were the main attraction, the bowhead, the sperm whale, and the beluga, to name a few. They were seen only as blubber and bones. Blubber for lamp oil and soap. Bones for fishing poles, corsets, and parasols. For these, the bowhead whale nearly became extinct. Today, the beaches are still heaped with evidence of the butchery that occurred here. Some species may never recover from the carnage. After the whale populations were decimated, hunters turned their greed from blubber to fur. Most Arctic animals are covered in it, and ice fox has one of the most luxuriant coats of all. Today, Arctic foxes remain one of the most persecuted animals in the north. They're hunted in winter when their coats are thick, soft, and pure white. Coast Pup is bundled against the wrath of the Arctic. He hardly feels a chill in a world cold enough to kill a human in 15 minutes. He's built to face all the challenges of this frozen world. All except one. Native people have been trapping foxes for centuries, but they only needed a small supply of pelts for their own use. Later, the fur trade increased the demand, and now snowmobiles have increased the power of the trapper. One person can cover 600 miles and trap nearly 1,000 foxes in a year. The more humane traps, like this one, smash the skull. At least the fox is killed instantly. But traditional leg-hold traps are still widely used. Metal clamps hold the fox in a death grip, while it slowly and painfully starves to death. The real threat to the foxes is not the hunter, but the whims of fashion. It's fashion that dictates how many foxes lose their lives. There are fox farms, but wild-caught furs are better quality. 20 foxes are often killed to find one perfect pelt. At present, the price of fox fur is low, and so is the incentive for trappers. Yet tens of thousands are still caught every year, many of them to become hats. Despite the threats of hunting and starvation, Coast Pup has survived this long winter. He's even found a mate. They'll stay together for years, perhaps even for life. He now begins his own family at the top of the world. Summer is not far away, and the birds are returning. It was a tough winter, with many hardships and obstacles. But Coast Pup has outfoxed them all.